Now that we have some game data, not a whole lot, but some, we're going to go through the process of building out our load and save game system. We'll start with it just dealing with the player and then expand on it so that it can save and load all of the things in our scene later. But first, we need to take a look at one thing in our workflow. I'm going to hit play real quick. Jump in from the menu, and I'm going to show you an error that you may have already seen, but if you haven't, it's important to see because it's going to be part of our workflow adjustment here. We're going to go to the console tab with it playing. I'm going to go into level 1. I'm just going to run over here, jump a couple times, and let this thing kill me so that I can get back to my menu in a second now. One more jump. There we go. And then I'm not really worried about these two errors right here. These aren't something that we need to worry about yet. There's something with the input system. What I'm worried about is that I just clicked anywhere on the scene and we got an error here saying null reference object not set to an instance of object. And here it's inside of our player.awake. So the reason I care more about this one right now is because it's in our actual code. These other ones are in the input system and we're going to be dealing with that along the way. Now, if I click one of the level buttons, you'll see that the game still works, even though that error is there. So you may be getting this error, you may have not noticed it, or it may just be there and seem like it doesn't matter. But there is something going on. So let's take a look at it real quick. I'm going to open up the code by double-clicking on the error and see that it's on line 49. And here you see that it's trying to access our player canvas. It's trying to find a player canvas and bind to the player canvas. And the reason that that's failing is that if we're in our menu, let's die real quick and go back to the menu. If we're in our menu, there is no player canvas. So there's nothing for it to bind to. So as soon as let's clear the log out. As soon as I click and add a new player, the player gets created. It's up here in the menu scene, and it's getting an error because it can't find that canvas. So I want to make a change. I want to make it so that our player input manager doesn't join players in the menu. And I also want to make it so that our player input manager and our game manager are available in the menu from the start so that we don't have to go into a level and load it because we're eventually going to need our game manager for loading and saving games. In fact, that's the key reason that we're going to go through this process. So let's stop playing. And we're going to go find our prefab for the player input and game manager right here and drag it into the menu scene. I'll save, and then we'll switch the join behavior here. Instead of it being join when a button is pressed to join manually. I'll save one more time, press play, and now guess what's going to happen when I click the button and join in? Well, you'll see in a second. If you guessed, cool. If not, then watch. So I click, nothing happens. That's good. Even though I've got the player input manager and game manager here, I'm not getting an error. But if I click level 1 and I get in, I've got my player here. That's all good too. Then finally, if I try to join in with a new player though, I can't. And now the reason that my player 1 is working and player 2 can't join in here is that if I look inside of level 1, let's stop playing, go into our level 1 scene. We have a player already placed here. We have player 1 already placed in the scene, so he's able to spawn. If I delete this player from my scene and save real quick, I'm going to undo that in a moment, so you don't need to do it. Let's go press play. And then if I jump in and hit join on level 1, you'll see that I don't get a player here. And the reason for that is that we now have to do our manual player joining. And you can even see that my camera isn't updating. Since I don't have a camera, I'm getting some things from the UI, and that's it. Everything is no longer updating. I'm no longer getting updates after the load completed and the old camera unloaded. So we need to make a change here. We need to modify our code so that the player input manager can join players on demand. And I want to undo that change to level 1 so that I have a player there placed where it's placed. So that's kind of my starting point when I want to just jump in and play on level 1. So first thing I'm going to do is go to Plastic SCM, find level 1 here that I just modified and changed, and right click on it and hit undo changes. That's going to undo the save that I did where I deleted the player. So if I go back to level 1, I now have a player in it. Then I'm going to go back to my menu scene, find my player input and game manager. And what we want to do is modify our code so that join behavior switches to join on button press if we're not inside of the menu. And we can do that using the game manager script. So let's open up the game manager. And inside of our awake, right now we get the player input manager and we register for the on player joined event. And then we essentially bind up our player whenever a player joins. So we've got a player input manager here, and we're going to need to reference it again to modify its join behavior. So instead of calling get component a bunch of times or multiple times, what we'll do is cache and save our player input manager. So I'm going to add in a new line here right before the dot in the parentheses, add some space here, and I'm going to say underscore player input manager equals get component player input manager. So that's line 20. I'll hit Alt Enter and generate a field for it. Now we should have a field for our player input manager. It looks like it went down here. I'm going to move both of these up to the top because I don't like having my fields down at the bottom. Right below my static instance. And let's add one line of space in between them. And then finally on line 27, or I'll copy line 25, paste it right here in front of 27. So now we get the player input manager and save it off into a variable that's private. I'll get rid of that private keyword since it's redundant though. And then we register for the on player joined event. The final thing that we need to do, let's clean that up, is register to our scene manager to get notified when we load a new level. Whenever we load a new level, if the level is the menu, we'll set it to manual join mode. If the level is not the menu, then we'll set it to click join mode or button press join mode. So to do that, we need to go down or add an extra line here and reference the scene manager static method or static event, which is scene manager. And notice that it's not auto-completing. What I can do is hit Alt-Enter and get the using Unity Engine scene management statement up at the top. So I'll hit that, go up to the top, and you can see that it added using Unity Engine.scene management. You can always just type this out if it doesn't auto-add. This is going to give us access to all of the scene management methods and classes. And the one that we care about is the static event on here, which is the I think it's scene loaded. That's it. Not on scene loaded, it's just called scene loaded. So I'll hit enter, let it auto complete the text or the casing there. It's got a weird casing, not the casing I would typically use, but that's what it's got, and we can't change it. So it's got scene loaded with a lowercase s, and we want to do plus equals because just like on player joined, this is an event that we're registering for. Remember, we just did our own event just a moment ago. Same kind of thing. We want to register so that something gets called every time a scene gets loaded. Let's call this handle scene loaded. We'll hit Alt Enter and generate a method for it. It's going to give me a private void method that has an argument. Arg is named arg0, which is the scene that got loaded, and then another argument for the load scene mode, which will tell us whether the scene was loaded additively or if it was loaded to replace the current scene. You can do it two different ways. We haven't talked about additive yet, so you can pretty much ignore that for now until we get into it. Let's delete the private keyword because we don't need it. And on line 35, what we want to do is check the name of arg0, which is our level name. So I'll say if arg0.name, and here let's set arg0 dot, and you can see all of the different things, the fields or properties that are on the scene object. So arg0 is a scene. They just name it arg0 because that's the default when it's auto-generating. So we've got the is subscene option, the handle for it, the root count, a couple other things. Let's scroll down. We've got the path, the name. There's a build index somewhere right there, build index, which is that index in the build settings. You see it starts at a 0. We want the name though, so we're going to check if the name is equal to, and we want menu with capital M. It needs to match the scene name. If it is the menu, then we want to tell the player input manager that its load or join behavior, where's that at? Join behavior is equal to, and here we want it to be the manual one. I accidentally did this backwards the first time I did it. Now, if it's not the menu, we want to do an else, which is going to run if this is not true. So if this is true, we'll get line 36. Otherwise, we'll get whatever's after line 37. And on line 38, we'll just say player input manager dot join behavior is equal to, and here we're going to use the button pressed, which is what we had before. I'll save that off, do Control-Shift-B to get a build. It looks like it succeeded. And then we'll jump back into Unity, and let's see if we're able to go through the entire flow of joining a game, getting through it without that error popping up anymore. So we press play. We've got our player input in GameManager. I click a level, joined, looks good. I can run over here. let myself die. Let's see if it all works. Notice that that other error message is gone too because that was in the player input manager trying to join. There we go. I'm in the menu again. I can click all around. I can click on my controller here. Everything looks good. I can go, let's go into level 2, and we have no more errors. I can join with the second player once I'm in the level, and things seem to be working good. So let's stop playing and go commit our changes into Plastic. So go over here. We don't have a lot, just our game manager and our menu that we fixed player input manager to support running on the menu scene. And we'll check in the changes.